Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is another kids special, which I know many of you have asked for. I really enjoyed doing the last one. It's a passion of mine, as you know, to get kids involved in Formula One. But today I have, as always on these things, loads of very special guests, but one in particular that you know very well, because somebody else that I also know is passionate about introducing kids to our sport is a friend of mine, Will Buxton. I'm going to introduce him properly in a moment, but welcome back to another Ask Elvis and Will Kids Special. Right, yes, today I'm going to be joined for the entirety of this video by somebody you know very well, Will Buxton. Let's bring him in now. Hello, Will, and thank you so much for joining me on this. I really appreciate it.
No worries, mate. I'm absolutely delighted. The questions have been great. I love what you're doing. Love that we're engaging with kids out there and trying to answer some questions, because I know that Formula One, it's such a great sport, but it can be really confusing as well. And the things that we take for granted, because we just assume that everyone knows them, might be some of the most interesting things. And so it's lovely to be asked those questions. And thank you for inviting me on to answer some of them.
Well, my pleasure, and I'll apologise now if you can hear what sounds, Will thought it sounded like a cow earlier. It's actually a guy with a chainsaw across the other side of the field, but we can't do anything about that, so we'll plough on. Right, as Will said, the questions have been brilliant, so thank you very much to all of the kids and, of course, your parents who've enabled that to happen. I really appreciate that. We're going to start. We've got a nice mix of questions from a lovely mix of people from all over the world, like we had last time. So let's start. We're going to start with this one from Katie, Katie Trainer, who's in the USA.
Hi, I'm Katie. I have a question. What does the color on the race car have to do with the place it's from?
What a great question. Thank you, Katie. Does the colour on the race car have anything to do with where it's from? Will, we've both worked across motorsport from across many years, across many different categories. There have been occasions when the colour of the car is representing where it's from, but in Formula One, it's not that common, is it?
It's not, but it used to be. It used to be the rule up until the late 1960s that your car had to be the colour of the country that it was registered to, and each country had a unique colour or set of colours so that you could tell where each car was from. So, for example, Italy, their colour was red. So that's where Ferrari gets its red colour from. It's where Maserati, they were also red. German cars had to be white, or as it became, silver. Mercedes originally ran as white cars. And then the rumour goes that the legend goes that the white paint was a little bit too heavy, so they scraped it all off. And underneath was the silvery sheen of the metal car, and that's where the legend of the silver arrows came from. And everyone, of course, has heard of British racing green. In British cars, they had to race in that really lovely dark green colour.
It's true, and I don't think a lot of people will necessarily know that if you're a new fan to the sport. Certainly, Katie, you're probably not old enough to remember those days, but that's a really interesting point, that that is exactly where it used to come from. So, I mean, what do you think, Katie? Would you love to see that going back? You're from the States. Would you like to see a nice red, white and blue car in Formula One? I'd love to know. Let us know. Brilliant question. Let's go on to the next one, which comes from Layla. Layla is just 3 years old and comes from London. Let's hear what she's got to say.
Layla, I'm 3. Dear Elvis, what's Lewis Hamilton fastest?
Right, what a great question, and this is a big one. How on earth are we going to answer this one? This could go on for hours. Why is Lewis Hamilton just so fast? And he has been incredibly fast. I was very lucky to work with Lewis when he first started in Formula One, when he was at the McLaren Formula One team, and he was very fast then. I mean, I'll give my thoughts, Will, and perhaps you can give some of yours as well, but my feeling on Lewis is that he definitely is very talented, Layla. He's very, very good at what he does. He's got a special talent, but he also works incredibly hard. He's, of all the drivers that I've worked with, Layla, he's probably the one that works hardest. And that is perhaps a good lesson for everybody, isn't it? If you want something badly enough, if you want to be the very best, just keep going, keep working hard, and one day you might just get there like Lewis. What do you think, Will?
I think Layla's asked a question that everybody in motor racing wants to know the answer to. Why is Lewis Hamilton so good? How is he so good? And I think, Elvis, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. When I was young, I remember my sports teacher told me that the phrase we're all told, practice makes perfect. He said, forget that. You'll never be perfect. It's impossible to be perfect because there's always something that you can improve, something that you can do better, something you'll look back on and think, oh, if I just changed this or I just changed that, I could have done it even better. He said that the phrase to remember is practice makes permanent. Because the more you practice something, the more it becomes natural for you. And I think that's what Lewis does, is he always looks at what he can improve, what he can do better. Even in years where he maybe hasn't had the competition on track, he's looked at himself and thought, how can I beat myself? How can I do better? And I think what you said there, mate, is it's exactly right. And it's a great lesson for everyone in life. And it's something that Lewis shows is no matter how good you are, keep trying, keep pushing, keep trying to make those little things better and you'll become unbeatable.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, isn't that true, Layla? Most people would look at Lewis Hamilton and say he's already the best. And we just look at how much he wins. So does he really need to keep improving? And the answer is absolutely he does, because everybody behind him, including his teammates, really want to try and improve and close that gap and start beating him. So if Lewis doesn't keep improving, he will get caught. So look, that's an amazing lesson. I think what Will said is spot on. Amazing lesson for everybody. So Layla, if you want to be the best at whatever it is you're passionate about in life, just keep practicing, just keep trying, and one day you might just get there yourself. But thank you so much for the question. That's a really good one. Let's move on to the next one, which comes from Emily, who's also 3 years old. So all the 3-year-olds out today. Emily is from Southsea, right here in the UK, and this is what she's got to say.
Hi, Elvis and Will. What are the fastest corners in Formula 1 from Emily?
What a cute voice. Thank you so much, Emily. The question, what are the fastest corners in Formula 1? And this is quite an open-ended one because it changes over time, because the cars get faster and slower. The way that the cars go around certain corners changes over time. Right now, and we've got some amazingly fast cars in this sport, probably the fastest we've had ever. And they may not be this fast again. So that's an amazing time we're in right now. The fastest corners, I mean, Will, tell me if you agree with some of these, but right here in the UK, we've got Silverstone, Copse, an amazingly fast corner, probably close to 200 miles an hour, I would have thought now. And then, of course, in Japan, we've got the 130R corner, which is also a very famous corner and incredibly fast. And then some of the circuits like Spa in Belgium, one of mine, I know it's one of your favourites as well, Will. Some brilliantly fast corners there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 130R that you mentioned and Eau Rouge, which is the bottom of the hill that the drivers go up, that's 310 kilometres an hour, which is 190 miles an hour through that corner. And you mentioned the corners at Silverstone, and there's the Maggotts and Beckett's complex, which maybe isn't as fast as some of the other corners on the circuit. But in Formula 1, when you're going through those corners really, really fast, you come under this immense pressure on your body that's known as G-force, which is when your body weighs more than it should. And because your body's being thrown around in the car and your head becomes really heavy through the corners, they take on this extra dimension. It makes them really, really difficult. When you get one fast corner followed by another fast corner, it sort of increases the difficulty of those corners.
Yeah.
But we've got some, as Elvis said, some amazingly fast corners in the sport, but some amazing straight line speeds as well. In Baku, the drivers hit over 210 miles an hour, which is 3 times the speed limit on a British motorway. 3 times as fast as you can go on a British motorway. And can I just say that I love Emily's hat, and I really want it because it's the coolest cap I think I've seen. Very cool.
Very, very cool. And Emily, just to kind of help you understand what Will just said there about the G-forces, have you ever been in your mum and dad's car when they might have gone round a corner perhaps a little bit quickly and you get thrown over to one side in your car seat in the back? That's because G-force is pushing you over or forcing you over to one side. So imagine doing that at nearly 200 miles an hour. What an experience that must be. Very few people ever get to experience that.
And the next time that your drink falls over in the back of the car, blame the G-force.
Yeah, very good. And couldn't agree more on your hat, Emily. I love it as well. Thanks so much for the question. Let's move on to the next one. And the next one comes from Miles. Now, Miles will explain this himself. He's the only boy in today's video, which I think is testament to the fact that we've got so much interest from girls in the sport, which is brilliant. I love to see, because in the last one of these we had no girls, and that wasn't through selection, that was just the way it turned out. Just by luck this time we've got almost all girls, apart from Miles, who's a little bit older than the rest. But let me show you what he's got to say. Really good question from Miles.
I may be on the older side of a kid, I'm 17, but I just wanted to ask, how did you go about getting into F1 being as an actual job prospect? Because that's something I'm really looking for the future. I'm looking to go into uni next year, but I want to know where to go, what to do, what I should do. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Miles. I really appreciate your question, because it must be harder to put in a video like that in a kids special at your age, but I think that's brave. It's really great, and it's a really great question. I think it's also a question that Will and I can probably answer from two very different angles, which hopefully might be useful for you.
Yeah.
I'll give mine, and mine obviously on the engineering side. I was always fascinated by the engineering side of motorsport and Formula One. I was always really fascinated by pit stops when I was growing up watching them on TV, and that's what I really wanted to do. And so I set my heart on doing that, and the way I got there was by kind of working my way up from the bottom, a little bit like a driver does. So I started at the bottom layer of motorsport, if you like, in karting, and then in British Formula Ford, got to Formula 3, and then what was Formula 3000, which is kind of, I guess equivalent to today's Formula 2. And I worked my way up as a mechanic through those categories, just like the way the drivers work their way up towards Formula 1. And then I eventually made that step. And all the way through that, I was trying to gain myself more and more experience, because every time I wrote to a Formula One team, they came back and said, look, that's great. We're really pleased that you want to come and work for us, but you haven't got enough experience yet. So I went back, I gained more experience. I offered my services for free at weekends to go and do work experience whenever I could. And it was those things that really got me across the line. And kind of eventually, I was very lucky that it was McLaren that caved in after all my letters of begging and gave me the chance to go in for an interview. So that's how I got there. It was always about being persistent, never giving up, and trying to get as much experience as I could, even if it meant working for no money. But Will, of course, came in from a very different side, didn't you, mate?
I did, but my story is very, very similar, and I think it's true no matter what age you are, and we're all kids at heart. You know, it's the trick with finding something that you want to do for your job is just that. Find something that you love. You love to do, and if you can turn that into your job, then it becomes the greatest job in the world. And that's something to follow from whether you're 5 years old or 15 or 25 or 35. It doesn't matter. Find something you love and go for it, and don't stop pushing for it. I think the biggest thing for me, much like Mark, was found this thing that I loved and I really wanted to do, and worked my way up. I wrote to everybody, I met everybody that I could. I wrote for websites when I started out as a writer for nothing, and this was back in the days long before you could write your own blog or start your own vlog and, you know, broadcast to the world through YouTube as you can do today. The opportunities are endless to become a writer or to become a broadcaster. There's so much possibility out there, but then it's once you get given that little opportunity right at the bottom of the ladder, and the door starts to open to the career that you want to have, jam your foot in that door and make sure it doesn't close, and always be positive and enthusiastic and give 100% to everything that you do, and people will look at you and say, there's somebody that really loves what they do. They are going to give everything to it, and they'll give you the opportunities and the chances, and one thing will come from another. You know, 20 years ago, I had this dream of writing about Formula One, and now here we are 20 years later, and I'm on the telly talking about it. It's crazy. You never know what's going to happen, and that comes from being passionate and giving your all, and just, you know, never letting any opportunity go by.
Yeah, really great advice. And the idea of never giving up, you know, you're never going to get there first time around. And I got so many knockbacks. I still kept to this day. I've got a stack this big of rejection letters from every single Formula One team.
I have the same.
Do you? Yeah.
I have the same. I have all my rejection letters from the BBC and from Autosport and all these people I wanted to work for have all the rejection letters, because that's your inspiration. That's
Absolutely.
Your fuel to keep going.
And I show them to my kids now as a sort of reminder to never give up, because, you know, so many letters from the same company saying thanks but no thanks. And then eventually, after so long, the same company wrote back and said, okay, come in, have a chat. And that's how it goes. One thing I would say, Miles, is if that's your passion, if Formula One is your passion, it is one of the best industries to work in the world. No matter which side of the industry you want to be on, it offers so much opportunity. And I think Will and I have both probably lived some incredible experiences through our involvement in Formula One, and they're just experiences you could not possibly get in most other industries. So if it's really what you want to do,
Absolutely.
Don't let anything stop you get there, and I hope maybe we'll see you in a pit lane at some point in the future. Thank you for your question. Let's get on to this next one, which comes all the way from India, and Krithi, who is 7 years old, asks this beautifully read question.
Hi Mark, my name is Kriti and I'm 7 years old and I'm an Indian. My dad watches all your videos and I watch them for Ginger, Wilson and Ferrell. I like them a lot. My question is, why can't Formula 1 cars be as strong as Formula E cars so that they can continue racing when they touch other cars? I think they can do it. Bye. Say hi to Ginger and the dogs.
Wait for it.
Oh, I forgot. My favorite racer is Kimi Raikkonen. Who is yours? As he gave a toy to a crying boy. Bye.
Bye-bye, Krithi. Thank you. That's a brilliant, brilliant question. I think we all remember that moment that Kimi gave a toy to that crying boy. It's become one of the most famous clips, hasn't it, in Formula One? And one of the many reasons that so many people love Kimi. Just to answer that one first, I don't know what you think, Will, but for me, Kimi's also my favourite. I worked with him for years. He's become a good friend over the years, and he's an absolute legend of the sport. So I'm with you on that one. Who's your favourite, Will? Are you allowed to have a favourite?
Oh, I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed. She's put me on the spot. I've got to say, I think Krithi's coming for my job. What a fantastic question, and such confidence in front of the camera.
Brilliant.
I have lots of favourite drivers that I've had over the years. But you can't really have a favourite while you're reporting on everybody. Otherwise, it's not fair to everybody else. But do you know what? On their day, every single one of them is something so special. They're great guys and great racers.
They really are. And let's get to your main question, which was a really good question, actually. Why are Formula One cars a bit more fragile than a Formula E car? So when they make any contact, you quite often get a suspension failure, the bits break and the car is out of the race. Whereas in Formula E, where they race much more closely on these tight street circuits, they do bash wheels every now and again and they're able to continue. Now, there's a very good argument, Krithi, to say that we should be moving towards that because it keeps the racing going. It keeps close racing. It allows them to race very closely. But on the other hand, it's not bumper cars. We don't want, like the bumper cars at the circus or at the fairground, we don't want cars crashing into each other all of the time. So the very best racing drivers in the world, I guess, should be able to race closely without making contact, without hitting each other. But I take your point. I totally agree with you. One of the real strengths of Formula E is that we don't get cars dropping out of the race after the slightest contact.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And obviously it all comes from the search to make Formula One cars lighter and lighter so that they'll go faster. And the lighter the parts, the more fragile they become. And that's how you have to weigh up. Do you want it to be sturdy and brake proof, but therefore heavier and slower, or really, really light, but also a little bit fragile? And Formula One cars are so light and they're so fragile and they've got so many little flicks and winglets and little bits flying off that, you lose one of those and all of a sudden the car doesn't react the way that it should. The aerodynamics are completely ruined. And I think the new regulations going forward that are now going to be in 2022 rather than in 2021, they're going to have less of these aerodynamic appendages, we call them, the little flips and winglets that can be broken off really, really easily. And hopefully if you have fewer of those, then there'll be less chance of them breaking off, less chance that the aerodynamics get disturbed if they get into some close contact with one another, and hopefully cars can then carry on racing at full speed without worrying too much about braking.
Yeah, and we should just say, Chrissy, that the big difference between Formula E and Formula One, kind of as Will just pointed out there, with Formula One, each team designs their own car completely, and they have to make it as light and as fast as possible, whereas in Formula E, the front suspension of every car is exactly the same. So because of that, they don't have to be constantly looking for ways to make them lighter and therefore more fragile. Everybody has the same suspension on the front end of their car, which means it can be as heavy or as lightweight as you like because everyone's got the same. It doesn't make any difference to the performance of each car. But a really interesting point, and I will say a big hello to Ginger and to the dogs. I'll also say hello to Rex, my other child, who's here as well. But I appreciate that Ginger is another girl about your age, and she's featured in a few of my videos. So she'll really appreciate you saying hello all the way from India. So thank you very much for that question. Let's move on to the next one, which comes from Grace. Grace, 10 years old, and from Rugby here in the UK.
Hi Elvis, I'm Grace and I'm 10 and I live in Rugby. I have a question for you. Why do F1 cars have different types of tyres, like soft, hard, medium, when normal cars on the road today have only one type? Thanks. As you can see, I love F1. This is my dad's burp. Mine now.
Very good, Grace. I wonder if your dad will ever get that mug back. But great to know that you're so into Formula One, and that's a really good technical question as well. Because if you're young and your only experience of cars, of being in cars, is in your parents' car on the road, which is as it is for most people, of course you're going to compare a Formula One car or a racing car to that. And the tyres on your road car are very different, aren't they? They're treaded, so they have the grooves and the tread over the top, but they're also, you're right, they only have one type, and it seems to work in every type of condition and it lasts forever. In Formula One, it's very different because, as Will sort of touched on in the last question, we're looking for ultimate performance with a Formula One car, with a racing car tyre. And to do that, we need it to be really soft and sticky. That's what gives us the grip. We need it to be able to warm up, and as it gets warmer, it gets more and more soft and sticky and gives more and more grip. That's how we get these cars going around corners just so quickly. The problem with that is when you have a soft and sticky tyre that gives brilliant performance, is it doesn't last very long. And unlike your road car, where the tyres will last for thousands and thousands of miles, a Formula One car's tyres will only last for a handful of laps in a Grand Prix before you have to come in and change them. So that's one very big difference. The reason we have different types of tyre in the sport is partly because we want to give some options to the teams and to drivers to mix up their strategy. So if they want to do the first part of the race on a really soft tyre, but then switch to later in the race to having a harder tyre to get to the end, they can do that. Whereas other teams might want to start on a harder tyre and switch to a softer tyre later on, or maybe make two stops and use two different types of tyre, three different tyres. So it's to give options within the sport. And of course, certain tracks and certain cars need a different type of tyre and different conditions, because everything is designed to try and get this particular tyre working the very best that it can to give the best performance on that particular day and at that particular circuit, which requires something much more specific than your road car.
It's a very complicated question, tyres, isn't it, Mark? It's one of the big things about Formula One. If you go back in history, right at the start of Formula One, they ran on normal road tyres, which had the cuts in, like your tyres do on your mum and dad's cars. And the reason that road cars have to have those tyres is they have to be suitable for all conditions. So whether it's raining or snowing, if it's icy or if it's completely dry, those tyres have to be good for all kinds of conditions. I've done a little drawing here. It's not a very good drawing. But that is your tyre, and that's your road. And you see those gaps there? Those are the little cuts in the tyre. So that's what a racing tyre used to be like. It was just a normal road tyre. Now, Mark's talked about grip. Why do you need grip, and what is grip? Well, if you think about a racing car, there are only 4 points on that car where that car is in contact with the road, and that's the bottom of the tyres. So if you're trying to get all of that power and all of that speed out of the engine, then you need to make sure that the point that the car actually touches the ground, so the bottom of those tyres, there's as much surface on that tyre to the ground as possible, so that it will stick to it and it will claw it. Imagine you're pulling yourself along the carpet or along the ground. You're literally pulling yourself along, and that's what the tyre does. It pulls the car forward. So what they did was they cut those bits off the bottom of the original tyres many, many years ago and came out with a tyre that looked like that. So you see there's no gaps, and all of that power, all of the energy from the engine turning those tyres pushes it forwards. It gives it loads of grip. And now Mark's talked about the fact we've got different compounds of tyres now. We've got the wet tyres, because obviously when it's raining, if you've got a flat tyre and the flat track and you get water in between that, there's no grip. So you need a little bit of the channels, those little gaps in the tyre to allow the water to go through. So you've got that grip back on track. But then we have the 3 compounds of tyres, and I find them so confusing. The hard and the medium and the soft, and what does it all mean? Well, essentially the harder the tyre, the longer it will last. And the softer the tyre, it won't last as long, but you'll get more speed out of it or more enjoyment out of it. And the way I thought to describe it is a little bit like ice cream. When you take the ice cream straight out of the freezer, it's rock solid, right? It's really hard. It's going to last for ages because you can't even get your spoon into it. But the softer the ice cream becomes, the quicker you're going to eat it up. So that's like the tyres. If it's really hard, they'll last for ages. If it gets really soft, it's all going to go. And that's how the compounds of tyres work.
Really good. So just think ice cream, Grace. That's how it works. Very good. We won't get into why we have so many flavours of ice cream. That's a whole other story. But a really nice way, to describe it. Thanks, Will. And thank you, Grace. Maybe you could share that mug with your dad. I'm sure he will miss it if you take it completely. But also, I think.
And what a professional microphone setup as well.
Amazing.
That's a proper recording studio there.
I love the flashing lights in the background. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Grace. Let's get on. We've got 2 more, and this next one comes from Chloe. Chloe comes from Canada. This is a really good question, this one. 10 years old is Chloe, and this is what she wants to know.
Hi, Mark or Elvis. I'm Chloe from Vancouver, Canada. My question is, can the girls race in the Formula 1 with the boys, and if not, why?
What a really good and interesting question, Chloe. Thank you very much. The short answer is absolutely, yes, girls can race in Formula 1 with the boys. There is absolutely no reason why that could not happen. And I'll let Will come on to this more in a moment, but I think we're getting closer and closer as time goes by. The biggest problem we've always had in Formula 1 is that most kids that get into karting, which is the first rung on the motorsport ladder, if you like, if you're a driver, you tend to start out in karting. And if we look at karting, most of the time at most kart tracks, it tends to be boys, or it always has been, that get into karting in the beginning. That's now changing, and more girls are getting involved in motorsport right from the very bottom at grassroots level, at karting level. Now, if we look at that right now, if that's getting bigger and bigger and more popular with girls, that's going to start filtering its way up towards the top. We already have the W Series, which is a brilliant thing just for girls racing in a very, very high level. And there are some amazingly talented girl racers in that who are now very, very close to getting that next step up into Formula 1. So I think the answer is an absolute yes, and I think we're probably a lot closer than we were a few years ago. Hopefully not very long before we see a really talented, really fast girl in Formula 1. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, as you say, it all stems from what you see As you're growing up, you know, you and I, Mark, when we were growing up, Formula One was full of men. So I think, you know, as kids, you look at that and think, oh well, it's something that only men do. Because it's this huge pyramid, as you've said, of the tens of thousands of people that start out in go-karts, and then the thousands go through to single-seater open-wheel cars, and then only tens go through, or 50s go through to tens to ones up to Formula One. It's a really steep pyramid of how many people will achieve getting to the very top of the sport. And if there are only a couple of girls in karting, the chances they have to get through to each level is that much smaller. The more girls that go karting, the more girls that start out, the more chance there is they'll rise to the next level, and then to the next, and then to the next, and then get to Formula One. And as you say, we have W Series now, which is an all-female championship, some brilliant racing drivers in that. Jamie Chadwick is part of the Williams F1 team. She's a reserve driver. Tatiana Calderon, another great female racer. She's part of the Alfa Romeo team. They're test and reserve drivers at the moment, but the fact that Formula One teams have got them on their books as part of the team shows that they recognise their talent, and they know they're going to be something really special. And there are loads of young girls coming through as well. There's one that I'm super excited about, and she's about to turn 14. She's still really young. She's a girl called Juju Noda, and she's racing in Japan, and she might just be the next Lewis Hamilton. And she's super fast, and everybody who's seen her drive, incredibly, at just age 13, 14 years of age, says she is super special. So I'm very excited to see how she
Well,
does.
amazing. Keep an eye out then. You heard it here first. Keep an eye out on that name. And Chloe, I mean, could it be you? Are you interested? Are you a racer yourself? Do you fancy ever getting behind the wheel and trying to work your way up towards it? Maybe Chloe Houghton from Canada could be in Formula One before you know it. Thanks ever so much for your question, Chloe. Really good one. And the final question for today's video comes from 4-year-old Izzy Scott Trainer, all the way from the USA. Here's what she's got to say.
What kind of colors are their shoes? And how their cars work?
So cute, so cute. Right, that question. What kind of colours are their shoes? Brilliant question, because we don't get to see the racing driver's shoes very often. They're buried in the bottom of a car, so a really sensible question. And how does a car work? Well, we could go on all day on that one. I'll give a very quick technical overview of how the cars work. Will, perhaps you can take the shoe part.
Great idea. You go car, I'll go shoe.
Excellent. All right. Well, cars, Izzy, they actually work very similarly to the way that your mum and dad's car work, in that they have an engine that's buried in the back of a Formula One car. So probably in your mum and dad's car, that engine's in the front. In a Formula One car, it's behind the driver. So that engine, you put petrol in it, just like you guys do in your road car, or gas. You're in the States, gas. Once you put petrol in, you fire up the engine, and that engine, as the engine turns, it ends up driving the wheels of the car and turning the wheels of the car, and that's what makes it go forwards. So that's how the car moves. In Formula One, you see they've got those big wings all over them on the front and the back, and all these little aerodynamic pieces, little flick-ups and tiny little bits sprouting off them all over the place. Those little things are to help push the car down into the racetrack as it's going really, really fast, and the wind is rushing over the car. Those wings push it down into the racetrack and help it to get grip and stick to the road so that it doesn't slide off the road when it goes around a corner. So that, in a nutshell, I hope, explains how a car works. But now to the really important bit. What about the colour of those drivers' shoes?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and it's a really important question because the shoes are one of the most important things that the driver has to wear, because his feet are always moving, or her feet are always moving on the pedals. So if their feet aren't comfortable, they're not going to be fast. They are light, probably about as comfortable as your slippers that you wear when you're going to bed, and they can be whatever colour you want. If you want a pink pair of racing boots, you can have a pink pair of racing boots. If you want them to be purple with silver stars and glitter, you can have that too, because they're yours and they're whatever you want them to be. And racing drivers will have very special boots. There was one racing driver who used to wear one blue boot and one red boot because they thought that it was lucky. So whatever you want your boots to be, that's what they can be, and they're a reflection of you and they're as comfortable as you want them to be, as light as a feather and as comfortable as your slippers.
Yeah, and there we go. Isn't that great that you could wear whatever you want? No one's going to tell you what your shoes have, what colour your shoes have to be. There are not many things in Formula One left where you have, as a driver, complete freedom to wear whatever you want in that sense. So isn't that amazing? Well done. Thank you very much, Izzy, for that question. And to everybody today, some amazing questions, a really nice spread of technical questions, of really interesting ones from people all over the world of different ages. And for that, I'm really grateful. I really appreciate it. Will, thank you so much for coming on the show and helping me with that. I know it's a passion of yours, just like it is for me. So thank you. That's been great. Have you enjoyed it yourself?
I've loved it, mate. I've really, really enjoyed it. It's been great fun. It's been lovely to hear so many interesting questions, and it's made me smile. It's made me smile so much. I hope we've been able to answer everything that everybody wanted, and hopefully we can do this another time soon. Just hope everyone's keeping safe, keeping well, keeping happy, keeping healthy. These difficult times will be over soon, I know it, and we can all get back to seeing our friends and having some fun.
Exactly what he just said. I hope we've made you guys smile as well. Thank you to all the contributors, thank you to all the parents, and thank you to you guys for watching. We'll see you again very soon. Ta-ra.